Hey there, One Missoula Church. We are coming to you today from my mom's church that we're about to go worship with. It's the gathering on Topsail Island in North Carolina. We got out to Topsail Island on the coast of North Carolina yesterday. Had some great flights across, so we're looking forward to a great week to follow. Really excited to do this, but wanted to say hello to you all. If we haven't met, welcome to One Missoula Church. My name is Brad. I'm the lead pastor there, and wanted to say if you wanted to get plugged in, you can use that Connect card you were given in the handout when you first walked in. Also wanted to introduce your speaker today. You're going to be hearing from our executive pastor, Hal Mayer, who's going to be speaking on trials, and he had quite the set of trials trying to get out to Missoula, so I'm sure he's going to tell you about it. But I hope you have an incredible day, and we look forward to seeing you when we get back. Later. Bye.
I think he needs to pay Arden for standing there smiling the whole time. Isn't that amazing? That kid just held that smile the whole time. Well, yes, Brad introduced me, and my name is Hal Mayer, and I serve as an executive pastor. Now, what that is a guy who helps look over finances. I do help in staff development and leadership development, do some coaching with your staff. And I'm a virtual XP, though. I'm from Florida. So what y'all do wrong up? Why is the weather here like it is in Florida? I mean, I think it's cooler in Florida than it is here. I don't know, man. But I have preached here a couple times, back when you were in the movie theater. And I got to say this, I am proud of the way you guys push through. You know, church planting is what you are, as a church that started from nothing. I mean, obviously the gospel, yes, but God using people to plant. That's the extreme sport of ministry. It really is. I mean, church plants don't all make it, and what it's contingent upon is finding people who want to find and follow Jesus, and you guys are doing that. You're serving, you're giving, you're inviting your friends. In fact, I said, do y'all remember back, well, forget remember, how many of you were there when there was 20 meeting in the hotel? Okay, a couple of you. How many of you came here during the time at the movie theater? That's when you first came. All right, how many came here since this building? Yeah, it's interesting to see how you guys have joined with Brad and the staff team here and continue to work hard to reach people far from God in Missoula. Guys, I want to give you a hand. Let's clap for that. Come on, some enthusiasm. There you go. What you're doing is exceptional. Your church is growing. I coach church planters, and you guys are one of the best groups as far as what you're doing, okay? You're seeing God win people. You're baptizing them. And by the way, I wish I could take credit. I can't. Brad is a really good preacher. I've listened to him. I thought, son, where'd you get that? He studies hard. He loves God. And some of you are wondering how I got connected to Brad. He and my sons were best friends in high school. And so he was over at our house all the time eating our food and playing basketball. Now, he did play basketball with my family in the driveway. My son made him a designated rebounder. He doesn't have a shot. Great volleyball player, but basketball, his best thing was jumping and grabbing balls off the board. But his senior year, he moved in with us. And to finish his senior year, his family moved up to North Carolina. And about the spring of that year, Brad commits his life to Christ. Now, he'd had some bit of a relationship, but never committed his life. So he commits his life to Christ. I get to baptize him, and he starts following hard after God. I mean, he is going full speed, seeing what God's doing. So then when I started a church in Tampa, I brought him in as a student pastor there for a while. And then in 2020, when y'all launched, I started coaching Brad. So that's our relationship. I enjoy seeing what God's doing here. In fact, the team that started that church in Tampa with me, I told them I was coming up here, and they were excited for that. So way to go, guys. You guys are working hard at it. Well, it was 1980. Now, some of y'all are going, wait a minute, that's in the 1900s, right? That's a long time ago. I was a high school basketball and football coach in this small town in West Tennessee. And I was also working as student pastor at church. Well, a lot of kids were coming to faith, and God was giving us good experience there. And then I felt God beginning to draw myself and my wife, and we had one child at that time, to go to seminary. Now back then, that's where you went to prepare for ministry. So we're getting ready to go. I put my house up for sale. It's not doing good, but I'd already enrolled in school. And a well-intended lady in our church said this, said, Hal, if you want God to sell your house, just tell him you won't go to seminary unless he sells it. That's not the way you bargain with God. I said, suppose God doesn't want me to sell it and take a financial loss. I don't know what God wants. I know he's going to take care of me. And so we rented the house and moved off to seminary. And the cool thing was, 2 months into seminary, they moved out of the house. And we're 800 miles away, and I'm stuck holding the house. And then I had a part-time job, working 20 hours a week, and I picked up 2 more because we had another child early on at seminary. 2 babies in diapers, my poor wife, right? She's typing my papers at midnight and taking care of kids during the day. I had a Honda Civic. Do y'all remember that car? I mean, about that big. Didn't have air conditioning. It was cheaper on gas that way. I was cheap. And the engine blows up. I say all that to say this. We went through trials, and I'm thinking this. God, I am trying to follow you. Is this really how you treat the people who want to follow you? See, I thought when you follow Jesus, he kind of worked everything out for you, and stuff worked well. Well, it didn't quite work that way. And I'm sure you all have some stories. You probably can talk about trials you've been through, maybe bigger ones than mine. But what I am saying is this. In the middle of the fire, God teaches us a lot of things. Here's one of the things I learned at seminary. Stuff doesn't matter. Right? I mean, we think it's the car we're driving or where we live or the stuff we own, the toys we have. That doesn't matter when you get there. Because what I realized under that, I wanted healthy kids and a healthy wife and to follow God. And God allowed us to do that. In fact, money had a real hook on me back then, but I didn't have much of it. What I found out was you can trust God. So Brad mentioned in the intro about my journey out here. One of the mistakes I make, of many, is when you're preaching on how to live in the fire, you get a chance to experience it. So Friday, I'm supposed to fly out of Orlando. And I get to the airport, and just as we're getting ready to load the plane, thunderstorm comes in. And I look, and there's a bunch. And they said, it may not get out of here till really late tonight. And in that case, I was going to miss my connector, and it was in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I'm going, geez. Hey, that's St. Paul, Minneapolis, right? I don't know what it is. Man, it's the Twin Cities. Y'all need to pay attention and help me out here. I didn't get much sleep last night so I go home and I get up at 2:30 your time yesterday. Nobody goes, wow, no mercy in this crowd. And I fly out. Well, our flight gets delayed again, and I get to Salt Lake, and they said, hustle, you'll make it. And as I get there, they're pulling the gangway out, and I'm going, unbelievable. Yeah, somebody said, oh, thank you. So there's another flight out. I'm flying standby at 4 o'clock. I get on that one, and I said, make sure they get my bags. Well, you know what happened. I didn't have bags. So I get in fact, if they didn't, I went and picked them up this morning at 6 a.m. If they didn't, you'd have seen me in shorts and a T-shirt. And honestly, you don't want to see shorts. It's not a pretty picture. So you get a chance, and we're going, that's not, you know what, that's a first world problem. Nobody in Uganda is fretting their bags being lost at the airport when they're flying and making connections, right? So I get it. But we all go through trials. Some are big, some are small. When you're in them, they feel big, right? Perspective is, oh my goodness. And there's a lot of confusion among Christ followers about pain and suffering and problems and tribulation. And it's because we've got some prosperity preachers out there who say this. Every time you pray, you'll get a yes. If you've confessed all your sin. Every time you pray, God will heal you. And I just want to press time out, but they don't let me. I want to say, why are you wearing glasses if all this healing works? Think about that. And you'll be rich and successful if you just give. Well, maybe. But what they do is they set us up and say, your faith is just not big enough. You only need faith the size of a mustard seed, and you can move a mountain. And all that, the problem with all that is it's not biblical. It's heresy. and it causes discouragement. Here's the truth. Throughout the Bible, throughout history, godly men and women have gone through trials, tribulations, and had suffered, right? Did Jesus go through that? Oh, you bet he did. Did his disciples? 11 of the 12 suffered a martyr's death. So why am I standing over here thinking I'm exempt, right? So do I believe God's healed people? God heals people? Absolutely. Just not every time. Does God answer prayer? Absolutely. Just doesn't give me everything I ask. The biggest difference, now here's where you want to make the mark, between the Christ follower and the person who is not following Jesus is not life's experiences. It's how you experience life. Because your friends are watching. And when your plane's delayed and you lose it and you go bananas, they go, "He's just like me." Or when something goes wrong with your kids and you get upset and you wonder, people look at you and go, "Well, you're just like us." See, the way we experience our problems says it is much louder than all the blessings we have. You got a lot of stuff, that's cool. Nobody's impressed with that. They are impressed with when you lose stuff or things bad happen or you struggle, how you respond. Health declining, how you respond. Job loss, maybe financial upheaval. The Apostle Peter, in his day, had to deal with this issue of people thinking, you shouldn't go through trials. In fact, this is a verse that's worth memorizing. 1 Peter 4:12, it says this, "Dear friends, don't be surprised at the," what type of trials? Say it again. Fiery trials you are going through, as if it's something strange were happening to you. Not strange. That actually wasn't a laugh line, but we'll go with that. It's not strange. It's part of the course. And our faith sometimes gets derailed when we buy the idea that we shouldn't go through that. See, God's plan for trials is for our growth and our development. Trials kind of show us the holes and the weaknesses. Do they still take the ACT and SAT for college? Yeah, okay. My kids, back in the previous century, were getting ready for college, and I bought the Kaplan CD set. Anybody here know what Kaplan was? Thank you. Yeah, old's in my rearview mirror. I'm past it, right? It was a CD thing. Now, I got to explain to y'all what a CD is. Little plastic disc that had stuff written on it, and you'd slide it into a hole on your computer, and it would read it. So you didn't go online, and anyway, you could go online, but it was quicker here. They could take the SAT or ACT as a practice, and then it would remediate. It would show them the wrong things, and it would go back and help them remediate the problems. Well, that's what God's doing with trials. You get a chance to see how you're really doing, right? Because your trials help you see what's really going on in your life. So today's message, we're going to talk about the fire. Now, some of you are in the fire right now. You need to listen up. Some of you will be in the fire next week. You need to listen up. Some of you had friends in the fire. You need to tell them. I think that captured everybody. So everybody needs to listen up, right? Turn to the person beside you and say, "Listen up, he was up late last night." And probably pay attention and help me when I miss it. So the book of Daniel is a book in the Old Testament, and it tells the story of the Hebrew people being overwhelmed, overtaken by the Babylonians. And in that day, the belief was whoever's army wins, that's whose God is the strongest, right? So Babylon, though, had a unique way to rule lands they conquered. And here's what Nebuchadnezzar said: "Select only the strong," verse 4, "healthy and good-looking young men." I've looked at the crowd. Some of us would not be picked. Ma'am, don't say that to your husband. "Make sure they're well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon." Here's what they would do. They would go in and find the best and the brightest, come in, brainwash them, immerse them in their culture, and then send them back to rule as a vassal king. In other words, they'd look like the people they were leading, but their heart was different. And what they said was, we're not going to let you worship the God of Israel. Instead, we're going to teach you about our gods. And here's the first thing they would do when they came in. They would change their name. That's your identity. And the Jews would have a name that referred to God. So Shadrach was originally, in the Hebrew, was called Hananiah. Meshach was originally Mishael. And Abednego was originally Azariah. Their birth names related to Yahweh, the God they worshiped. And every time they called their name then in Babylon, it reminded them, this is your God, not that God. Make sense? The first thing they did was took away their faith, took away their names. Then they took away their manhood. These guys became eunuchs. They'd tried to serve them food that had been sacrificed to idols. So these three teenagers, get that, teenagers, are in a foreign land being brainwashed. But here's the thing, the Bible doesn't mention anywhere where they sinned. It doesn't mention why they're slaves. Sounds kind of unfair, doesn't it? You ever said that to God? This isn't fair? Come on. Everybody in here has. I know, God, this isn't fair. Why did you let this happen? If anybody could have said it, they could, and it's not recorded that they said it. So weird stuff starts happening. I'm going to paraphrase some of this. In chapter 3, 1 through 6, it said, King Nebuchadnezzar made a statue. It was 90 feet tall, and he put it out there, and they were to bow in front of it. In fact, in verse 4, it says, the herald shouted out, people of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and pipes, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. It's a power move. Anyone who refuses to obey will be thrown into the fiery furnace. Politicians like attention. Have you discovered that? Absolutely. This one even liked their worship. And so he was going to set it up in the land. I'm the guy, worship that. He was changing everything. And you know what happens? They don't bow. And in verse 13 it says, Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage because they wouldn't bow. And he said to them in verse 14, is it true that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold statue? I'll give you one more shot. In other words, maybe you didn't hear it clearly, but if you refuse, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? This guy's setting him up as more powerful than God. He said, we already beat your God when we beat you. I'm going to throw you into the furnace if you don't worship that idol. So what are they going to do? Well, you know what they're going to do. You've heard the story. They don't bow. So what do you learn from these guys? Three teenage boys. What can we learn from them? But because of their faith, they're going through pain. It wasn't they were bad. We all get that, right? You did something stupid, you pay for it? Okay. But you do the right thing and you pay for it? Are you serious? How about these guys? Let's learn some principles for a believer for how to go through this. First one is this: choose your audience early. Choose your audience, who you're trying to impress before you ever get there. See, no matter who you are, you've got to choose audiences. There's a lot of different places that athletes, I mentioned earlier, I coached high school football. And I can remember this was a small town, and the team in that town had won a state championship runner-up or something. And so their dads, 20 years later, were on the sidelines telling their boys how to play. Now, I get it. 20 years ago, you kids in here have heard your dad tell the stories, right? And if the truth be known, the older he gets, the better he was, right? Think about that. The older he gets, the better he was. I tell my kids those stories. I'm amazing back then. Wasn't the life I lived, but my kids don't know that. So these dads are on the sideline, and they're telling, oh, do it this way. And finally, I call time out. I say, boys, come here. Here's the deal. If you want to follow your dad's instruction, he's a great guy. You can do that, but you can stand beside me here on the sideline. If you want to be on that dirt out there playing football, then you're going to do what I say. So what do you think? And there we turned it around because what they needed to focus on was not their dads, but listen to the coach. CEOs, some of them, all they care about is their own finances. And they don't care about their employees or their stockholders, right? As a Christ follower, who are you trying to please? God calls us to play to an audience of one, and that's him. You know you can't please everybody. How many in here are married? Can I see your hand if your spouse pleases you in everything they do? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, brother, I don't believe her. No, the truth is you can't please everybody all the time, but you can please God. Hebrews 11:6, when we trust God in faith, we can please him. So choose an audience of one. Choose to please him. These young guys had already decided. I want you to hear their response. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you. They're saying, we're not going to argue with you. Now that's the first. Teenagers not wanting to argue? Really? You don't have another idea? They said, we don't have to, listen to this, we're not going to defend ourselves to you. So they chose first the audience of one, God. Second thing, act on God's truth. Sometimes we consider circumstances and see them as the truth. If you or I were there, we might rationalize it like this. Well, God's put me here to make a difference. I can't make a difference if I'm dead, so maybe I should just bow and later explain it. Maybe you're at work or you're in school and they're gossiping or they're telling filthy stories and you're listening because you're thinking, oh, maybe one day I'll get to witness to them. That's where we start rationalizing. They might have thought, you know what, I'll bow, but in my mind I'm still praying to God and I'll just confess it later. See, the power for the Christ follower, the strength to live, comes when we obey. Despite the cost or the fear, I want you to hear how these young men responded. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. They're making a statement. He'll rescue us from your power, your majesty. Isn't it interesting? They're still speaking respectfully. There's something in the discourse that's missing today, and it's called respect. It's such a vital piece. These young guys are speaking respectfully. He said, but even if he doesn't, in other words, if God doesn't come through and deliver us the way we'd kind of like it, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, respectful, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue that you have set up. What they're saying is, regardless of this happening, we're over here focused on this. Regardless of circumstances and what may be unfolding, their death, most of us aren't facing death for our faith. They're choosing, no, we're going to follow God. Because often, if we let circumstances or condition determine our choices, we're going to miss it. Because in the heat of battle, you're not going to make a good decision. Oftentimes, you make the wrong decision. Here's the principle. When you're coming up to a decision, make the right decision and then manage the consequences. It's an important piece. Don't try to manage the consequences into the right decision. I have watched people say, well, if I make this person, what I've got to do is find a way to move them slightly over there. Now, it's good to work with people, but here's what I'm saying. You can't manage the consequences into the right decision. You can make the right decision and deal with what's left. Does that make sense? Sometimes you got to just make, as the old Southern preacher used to say, you make the right decision, let the devil catch the hindermost. I had a pastor friend that would say that. Make the right decision, then manage the consequences. The third thing, remember the benefits of firewalking. When I'm in a trial right now, I often look back to the past, other trials, and I see where God came through. And based on what he's done, I know I can trust what he's going to do, right? So sometimes in the fire, you don't see his hand, but trust his heart because he's already there for you. Does that make sense? It's this picture of I am facing the unknown. However, God's brought me thus far. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to go forward with him. See, trials aren't designed to break you, but to build it. Fire walking exposes your faith. See, I don't know what anybody's faith is till I see them go through problems, through pain, right? You really don't, because when everything's good, hey, I love Jesus, and people say, well, yeah, I mean, it's the story of Job. Remember the devil saying to God, well, of course Job follows you because you take care of him. And then you see the troubles Job went through, and he never walks away from God. But here's what I mean when I say the fire, pressure, will show you what's really inside of you. I'm from Florida, and down there we have oranges. I don't know if y'all have seen them. They're this ball about this big. Oh, y'all know what they are? They're orange. If I squeeze an orange, what comes out? Juice. However, if I'm being sneaky and I clean out the orange and I put sand in there and you squeeze it, what comes out? Sand. Here's the principle. When you squeeze it, whatever's on the inside comes out. See where I'm going? When you're squeezed, whatever's in you is what comes out. I heard people say, oh, that's not me. No, it really is. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I'm not perfect either, but let God change you. But don't deny that it's there. That's why it came out, because it was in you. Make sense? All right. A tested faith is a real faith. Next thing is, fire walking releases you from a lot of bondage. It could be people you're trying to please. It could be situations in your life. But I want you to look at this verse here with me, starting in verse 24. Very interesting perspective. The king and some of his guys are hanging out outside the fire, watching these guys cook. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumps up in amazement, and he exclaims to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them in the furnace? Yes, your majesty, we did. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men. What's the next word? See, the only thing that burned in the fire was the bindings. Does that make sense? The only thing that burned was what kept them restricted. The fire for me. God freed me up from the fear of finances, right? So, look, Nebuchadnezzar, I see 4 men walking around. Now, 4, Jesus was there in the middle with them. You know, in the middle of your trial, you may not see him, but he's there. He said, I see him unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed. And the 4th looks like a god. That's been the case for me, not always in the middle, but as I look back. You know, what do they say, hindsight's 20/20 or better? That's why it's important to look back. You know, that's why in the Old Testament, they had all these festivals. Festivals were looking back at God's goodness, how God had come through. They would celebrate Passover. What's that about? When God delivered them out of slavery. Why did they do that? To remember that right now, whatever you're in, God can deliver you. Because in the trial, we find out what's really important. You may think your house is important, and if it burns down and you get your kids and family out, you go, I can get another house. That's not what was really important. See, in the fire, we see God more vividly. We've lost things, and you thought, oh, I'd never make it without that. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it was a job. And then God comes through. Now, back in the 1900s, go way back, late 60s, early 70s. Only 3 people in this room were with me then. We had televisions. Yes, they were there. Most of them were not color. There were no computers, no iPods, no iPhones. I mean, everything you were, back then your phone was tied to the wall. Now you're tied to your phone, but the TV had VHF channels and UHF. Now, VHF had the rabbit ears, and you click the channels, you turn it, and it would click the channel. UHF was this weird set of 5 or 6. Anybody remember UHF? Google it. I think Google will find it back there. It was a round antenna, and it tuned in like a dimmer switch. So it would be ugly and okay, better. But there was always, and I watched TV shows like that in standard definition on screens that big. It's crazy, I know. But today, we've got HD, we've got 5K. And here's what I discovered. In the fire, I see God in HD. It may be old style TV, not in the fire. God comes through. When I've gone through my biggest challenges is when God shows up the most in my life. When we moved to seminary, we were doing things I'd never done. And God stretched me. When we started a church, God stretched me. Here's what I want to encourage you. Let God stretch you. Do some things that are challenging. I'm not saying jump off a mountain. But what I am saying is trust God and go for it. Some of you don't give because, and how do I know some of you don't give? I've been around about 40 years in churches, and I know not everybody gives. I haven't been looking at your giving records. But we don't give because we're thinking, oh, I can't afford to. Faith giving is you give first. Make the right decision, right? So trust God. Find a place to trust God and see if you don't see him differently when you suddenly have to trust him. Because the result of how you respond in the fire is this. Verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar said, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any other God except for their own God. See, at the end of the day, the impact you and I make is not from the cool stuff we have or get to do. It's how we walk through the trials of life. People go, oh, wow. Somebody gets injured, and they continue to follow God. Somebody loses. You're with me, I know. You're thinking through that. Because God gets the glory because you and I aren't good enough to get it. We know us. Here's an interesting statement. God's people have always suffered. The only thing more shocking than the trials is that we're surprised when they come. Why, God? Why did this happen? We've all asked that. 1 Peter 4:12, that verse I started with, I'm going to land with. Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you're going through, as if some strange thing were going to happen to you. God made you for the trial. God made you so that you can learn in the trial and be developed in the trial. Let me ask you a question. What are you walking through right now? What fire? Are you trusting God there? Are you making sure you're choosing him as your audience and not everybody else? Will you obey him when you get that challenge and it's costly? Man, you know what? There's some of you here, as I'm talking about this, you're going, that sounds good, but this Jesus, maybe you've never committed your life to Christ. Now, the truth is this. The gospel says Jesus died, was buried, and rose again from the dead so that we could be forgiven our sins. So what I need to do and you need to do is trust him, right? Is to surrender our lives to Christ. I did that when I was 16 years old. If you've never done that, I want to give you an opportunity. I'm going to pray a prayer out loud that you can pray silently right where you sit. And you can begin that journey today. Oh, it's not over. Oh, you're going to have problems and trials. But here's the good news. You got somebody walking through them with you. So if you'd like to trust Christ, everybody bow their heads right now. First, let me pray for those who are going through the fire. God, I pray for the men and women and boys and girls here that are going through pain and suffering and challenges. God, you don't cause pain. You don't cause all the suffering. But in the middle of it, you deepen our faith. So I pray for them to be deepened. And for those who have never trusted you, I'm going to pray a prayer out loud, and you can pray silently to God. He knows your heart. Dear Jesus, thank you for loving me. Right now, I ask you to forgive me of my sin. I want to follow you. I trust you as my Savior. Come into my life and make me the kind of person you want me to be. I want to follow you, Jesus. I want to live for you, Jesus. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.